What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Miguelito To Toe, where we talk boxing, compact sports, the business behind the fight game, and everything in between. Today, we're talking about something that's becoming harder and harder to ignore. Boxers are taking the gloves off, literally. We're seeing experienced professional boxers, former champions, contenders, Olympic level fighters, and veterans making the transition from traditional boxing to bare knuckle boxing. And at first, you might think, what's the big deal? It's still boxing, just take the gloves off. Well, not exactly. Bare knuckle boxing might look like boxing without gloves, but once those gloves come off, the strategy, the defense, the risk, and even the way you throw punches can change. So today on Miguelito To Toe, we're asking, why are boxers making the switch to bare knuckle? And does being a great boxer automatically make you a great bare knuckle fighter? Let's get into it. Let's start with the obvious question, why? Why would a fighter who spent years building a career in traditional boxing decide to walk into a ring with almost nothing protecting their hands? There are several reasons. The first one is simple: opportunity. Boxing is a difficult business. There are thousands of professional fighters competing for a limited number of major opportunities. You can be a former champion and still find yourself waiting months or even years for the right fight. That's where bare knuckle promotions have created another lane for experienced fighters. Instead of completely walking away from combat sports, a boxer can potentially reinvent themselves. And that's important because sometimes a fighter isn't finished fighting. They just might be finished getting the opportunities they want in traditional boxing. Let's talk about another obvious factor: money. At the end of the day, professional fighters have bills to pay. Training camps cost money. Managers, trainers, nutrition, travel, all of it costs money. If a bare knuckle promotion can offer a veteran fighter a meaningful payday, that can be very attractive. And there's another advantage: bare knuckle boxing is still growing. That means there are opportunities for fighters to become recognizable names in a relatively young combat sport market. For a boxer whose traditional career may be winding down, bare knuckle can provide another chapter. And that's exactly what we're saying. We've already seen some legitimate boxing names make the jump. Take Jamel Herring. Herring isn't some guy who decided one day that he wanted to try fighting. We're talking about a former world champion. He made the transition to bare knuckle and had to make adjustments to the way he approached defense and movement. Then there's Austin Trout, another former world champion. Trout has become one of the more interesting examples of a high level boxer adapting to bare knuckle competition. And then you have Paulie Malignaggi, two division world champion, former elite level boxer. Paulie stepped into BKFC and faced Artem Lobov in one of the most talked about bare knuckle fights of its era. And more recently, we've seen fighters like James DeGale, a former IBF super middleweight champion and Olympic gold medalist, return to combat sports through bare knuckle competition. So this isn't just a bunch of random boxers looking for something to do. We're seeing legitimate boxing credentials enter the sport. Here's where things get interesting. A great boxer does not automatically become a great bare knuckle fighter. And that's something I think people need to understand. Bare knuckle boxing still rewards the fundamentals of boxing: footwork, timing, distance, accuracy, angles, counter punching, ring IQ. All of that matters. But taking away the gloves changes the equation. Let's talk defense. In traditional boxing, you got those big gloves protecting your hands and giving you more options when blocking punches. You can bring your gloves high, you can catch punches, you can observe certain shots on your guard. You can use your gloves to protect your face. But bare knuckle, those gloves aren't there. And that means fighters have to think differently. Jamel Herring has talked about how his defensive approach had to evolve, emphasizing movement, pivots, and upper body movement. That's a major adjustment. Because standing directly in front of another fighter and relying heavily on a traditional high guard can become a dangerous strategy when there isn't a big glove sitting between your face and the incoming punch. And here's something people don't always think about. In boxing, the gloves aren't just there to protect your opponent. They're protecting you, your hands, your knuckles, your wrist, your fingers. Take those gloves away, and every punch becomes a calculation. How hard do I throw? Where do I land? What part of my hand makes contact? What happens if I hit the opponent's forehead? And what happens if I miss? What happens if my hand lands awkwardly? You can hurt your opponent, but you can also hurt yourself. And that's why the transition requires more than just changing equipment and requires changing habits. Another adjustment is punch volume. Traditional boxing encourages fighters to throw combinations 1 2, 3 punch combinations, 4 punch combinations, body head combinations. But in bare knuckle, every punch has consequences. That doesn't mean combinations disappear. It means fighters may become more selective about when and where they throw. Accuracy becomes incredibly important. You don't want to throw 5 punches just because you can. You want those punches to have a purpose. This is probably the biggest misconception. People say it's just boxing without gloves. I don't completely agree. Yes, the foundation comes from boxing, but the environment changes the way the fighter has to operate. The distance can feel different. The defensive priorities change. The risk of cuts increases. Hand injuries become a bigger concern. And fighters have to become comfortable operating in a completely different kind of combat environment. That's why someone can have an incredible boxing resume and still struggle to adapt. So, what type of boxer might actually thrive in bare knuckle? I think fighters with several qualities have an advantage. Number one, accuracy. If you have a precise puncher, that's valuable. Number two, footwork. Being able to control distance and avoid unnecessary exchanges is huge. Number three, ring IQ. You have to understand when to attack and when to get out. Number four, adaptability. This might be the biggest one because if you try to fight bare knuckle exactly like you fought with gloves, you're probably going to have problems. The best transition fighters are willing to learn. But let's not pretend the transition is easy. There are real risks, cuts, hand injuries, knuckle damage, different defensive challenges, and potentially a completely different pace of fighting. A boxer has to understand that they're entering a different combat sports environment, and that's why experience matters. A veteran boxer who's willing to adapt could have a major advantage, but a fighter who assumes I've been boxing for 15 years, so I automatically know how to do this, could find out very quickly that bare knuckle is its own game. Would I like to see more boxers make the switch? Personally, I think it's fascinating because we're watching combat sports evolve right in front of us. Boxers now have more options: traditional boxing, MMA, bare knuckle boxing, and each sport demands something different. For a veteran boxer whose traditional career is slowing down, bare knuckle could provide a second act. And that's good for the fighters because fighters deserve opportunities. But who should make the switch? Now, here's where I want to hear from you. If you could pick 5 current or former boxers to transition into bare knuckle boxing, who will you choose? Would you pick the biggest punchers, the technical boxers, The pressure fighters, the veterans, or would you choose somebody completely unexpected? But because here's the thing, the best traditional boxer isn't necessarily going to be the best bare knuckle fighter. The fighter who adapts the fastest might be. So, what do you think? Are boxers transitioning into bare knuckle because traditional boxing isn't giving them enough opportunities? Is it about money? Is it about competition? Or are we watching the emergence of a completely new lane for professional fighters? Personally, I think it's a combination of all three. Bare knuckle boxing is giving experienced fighters another place to compete, another way to make money, and potentially another opportunity to build a legacy. But remember, taking the gloves off doesn't mean the game stays the same. The fundamentals of boxing can get you through the door. Adaptation is what keeps you there. And that's today's episode of Miguelito To Toe. If you enjoyed the episode, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. And let me know in the comments, which boxer would you most like to see transition to bare knuckle boxing? I'm Miguelito, and this is Miguelito To Toe, where boxing meets the conversation. I'll see you on the next one.